These are the numbers, names, and events behind Snoop Dogg's rise from a Long Beach street corner to a reported $160 million empire. This is the story of how Calvin Cordé Broadus Jr. became one of hip-hop's most enduring figures, and what his life actually looks like today, from a murder trial that nearly ended his career before it began, to the mansion, the marriage, and the 4 kids carrying his name forward. Calvin was born on October 20th, 1971 in Long Beach, California, to a mother named Beverly Broadus, though his birth father was a man named Vernell Varnado. Beverly later married Cordé Calvin Broadus Sr., and that's where young Calvin got his name. As a kid, his family called him Snoopy because he reminded them of the Peanuts character, which meant the nickname that eventually became one of the most recognized names in music history started as something his mother came up with at home. He was singing and playing piano at Golgotha Trinity Baptist Church before he ever picked up a mic, and rapping followed not long after, starting in the 6th grade. His teenage years took a rougher turn. He joined the Rollin' 20 Crips and did time for cocaine possession before music gave him a different direction to run in, and it was around that same stretch that he formed a group called 213 with his cousins Nate Dogg and Lil Half Dead, plus his friend Warren G., the name borrowed straight from the Long Beach area code. A homemade tape from that group made its way into Dr. Dre's hands, which led to an audition, and Dre's collaborator, the DOC, took Calvin under his wing, teaching him how to actually build a verse, a hook, a full song. By 1992, that mentorship paid off. Snoop landed on Dr. Dre's solo debut, The Chronic, including the Track Deep cover, and that single credit changed the trajectory of his entire career. But here's the thing. Before that career could really take off, it almost didn't happen at all. On August 25, 1993, a 20-year-old named Philip Woldemariam was shot and killed at Woodbine Park in the Palms neighborhood of Los Angeles, and the shot came from Snoop's bodyguard, McKinley Lee, fired from inside Snoop's own vehicle. Snoop and his friend Sean Abrams were charged too, though the case against Abrams was eventually dropped. Snoop turned himself in shortly after that year's MTV Video Music Awards, and he and Lee each posted $1 million in bail while they waited for a trial that wouldn't even start for 2 more years. That November, with the case still hanging over him, he released his debut album, Doggy Style, on Death Row Records, and it debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, which meant Snoop was simultaneously becoming one of the biggest new names in music and facing a murder charge at the same time as a 22-year-old. The trial finally opened on November 27, 1995, in a Los Angeles courtroom under Judge Paul G. Flynn. Prosecutors said Woldemariam was shot trying to flee. The defense said the opposite, that he'd reached for a weapon and Lee fired in self-defense. And during the trial, it came out that the LAPD had lost key physical evidence, a bloody shirt, a bullet, a shell casing, the same kind of evidence handling failure that had dogged the department during the O.J. Simpson trial that same year. That detail mattered. On February 20th, 1996, after 6 days of deliberation, the jury acquitted both Snoop and Lee of murder and assault. They deadlocked on a lesser manslaughter charge, and prosecutors decided not to pursue it further. Woldemariam's family later filed a $25 million wrongful death suit, which was settled quietly out of court in August of that same year. The case sparked something bigger than just Snoop's own legal troubles. It fed directly into a national argument over whether gangster rap reflected real violence in certain neighborhoods or actually encouraged it, and that debate stuck around the genre for years. As for the arrest itself, it sat on Snoop's record for nearly 3 decades until a petition to have it sealed was reported approved in October of 2024. Once the trial ended, his music career only sped up. The Dogfather, released in 1996, also hit #1, and from there he moved from Death Row to No Limit Records under Master P, putting out 3 albums between 1998 and 2000 before continuing on through Priority Capital, EMI, and Geffen. By 2026, industry trackers had him at 20 studio albums total, which is a career most artists would kill for even without everything else he's built alongside it. And then in 2012, he threw a curveball nobody saw coming, announcing a conversion to Rastafarianism after a trip to Jamaica and performing for a while as Snoop Lion, releasing a reggae record called Reincarnated. By 2015, he was back to being Snoop Dogg, no explanation required. Now here's where it gets interesting because Snoop's business sense turned out to be just as sharp as his ear for a beat. As of 2026, trackers including figures reported by Forbes and Celebrity Net Worth put his fortune somewhere between $150 and $180 million, and $160 million is the number that shows up most often. Worth remembering, these are public estimates, not audited numbers, so the real total could land anywhere in that range or past it. Where's it coming from? A big chunk comes from features. Snoop has said publicly that a 16-bar verse runs an artist $250,000, and if you want him in the video too, that's another $250,000 on top. More recent estimates push that number as high as $500,000 per feature depending on the project. Then there's Death Row Records, which had bounced between owners for years, filing for bankruptcy in 2006 and eventually landing under a Blackstone-managed fund by 2021. On February 9, 2022, Snoop announced he'd bought the Death Row brand back from MNRK Music Group, terms undisclosed. It feels good to have ownership of the label I was part of at the beginning of my career and as one of the founding members, he said in his statement at the time. Blackstone's David Kestenbaum, who spent months negotiating the deal, called it putting the brand back in the hands of a legend. What the deal didn't include, notably, was the rights to Dr. Dre or Tupac's catalogs, and Billboard estimated that with those catalogs, Death Row pulled in around $15 million a year, without them, closer to $6 million. Days after that announcement, Snoop performed at the Super Bowl 56 halftime show next to Dr. Dre, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar, and 50 Cent, which put about as bright a spotlight as possible on the whole comeback. He didn't stop at music and Death Row either. In 2022, Death Row launched its own cannabis brand, and Snoop had already co-founded a cannabis venture capital firm, Casa Verde Capital, years earlier. By 2025, that grew into Iconic Tonics, a lineup of 7 cannabis and hemp beverage brands built with longtime collaborator Evan Enneman. Then there's Doggyland, his kids' entertainment brand launched in 2022, now closing in on 1.3 million YouTube subscribers, and in 2024 he worked as an official NBC correspondent at the Paris Olympics, reportedly pulling in $500,000 a day, close to $8.5 million total, according to reporting from the Economic Times. So where does all that money actually live? Here's the surprise. His main home is modest by celebrity standards. Back in 1998, he bought a place in the gated county estates community of Diamond Bar, California, for around $720,000, and today it's estimated at roughly $1.7 million. For scale, Jay-Z reportedly dropped over $200 million on his house, Drake around $100 million, so whatever Snoop spent barely registers next to that. The Diamond Bar property runs somewhere between 3,800 and 4,000 square feet on close to 3 acres, 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a pool house, a gazebo, a basketball and tennis court, and it's been his home base since the early 2000s. Down the same street sits a smaller property. He turned into a private recording studio, nicknamed The Church, and out in Inglewood, minutes from LAX, he owns a roughly 20,000 square foot compound with a dance studio, a game room, a casino area, a soundstage, and part of his car collection. Before any of that, his first real star home was a ranch house in Claremont, purchased in 1994 for around $600,000. He expanded it considerably over the years and sold it in 2007 for close to $2 million. As for the garage, reports put the collection at around 14 vehicles, a mix of custom lowriders honoring his West Coast roots alongside serious luxury hardware. The most expensive of them all is a Rolls-Royce Phantom VII, reportedly north of $343,000. Now to the people who've actually been there through all of it. His wife, Shante Broadus, goes back further than any business deal, all the way to Long Beach Polytechnic High School, where the two met as teenagers and even went to prom together. They married in 1997, separated in 2004, and got back together, remarrying in 2008. These days, Shante is his official business manager, a role she took on in 2021 overseeing his brand deals, music, and acting career, and she's built her own company on the side, Boss Lady Entertainment, focused on managing labels and studios. In a 2024 Instagram Live, Snoop explained why he turned down a reported 9-figure offer from an adult content platform in blunt terms, saying he had a wife who wasn't going to let that happen for any amount of money. Together, he and Shante have 3 kids. Cordé, the oldest, born in August of 1994, makes music under the name Calvin Love. Cordell, born in 1997, was actually a standout football recruit who earned a UCLA scholarship before walking away from the sport for film and media work instead. And their daughter Cori, born in June of 1999, records under the name Chalk and runs her own beauty company, though she's also lived with lupus since childhood and, according to what Snoop has shared publicly, went through a stroke in early 2024. His 4th child, Julian, born in June of 1998, comes from an earlier relationship with a woman named Lori Helmond. Unlike his siblings, Julian skipped entertainment entirely and built a career in tech, working in promotions for a gaming and NFT company. Across all 4 kids, Snoop has become a grandfather several times over, somewhere between 6 and 8 grandchildren depending on when you're counting, since the family kept growing. Not every part of that growth has been easy, though. Cordé's infant son Kai died just 10 days after birth, and Cori's daughter, born in February of 2025, passed away around 10 months later. Snoop has spoken about both losses publicly and with real emotion. Then there's the friendship that's become almost as famous as the music, his bond with Martha Stewart. They met in 2008 when Snoop guested on The Martha Stewart Show, making mashed potatoes together in what Stewart later called an odd couple pairing, and things really clicked in 2015 when they ended up seated next to each other at Comedy Central's roast of Justin Bieber. "She sat next to me and she stole the show," Snoop said afterward. "In that moment, I knew I wanted to be alongside this lady for the rest of my life." From 2016 to 2020, the two co-hosted a VH1 show together, Martha and Snoop's potluck dinner party, and Stewart has been just as warm about it, telling people back in 2018 simply, "Snoop is my freedom." A couple of last details fill out the picture. Despite fronting multiple alcohol brands over the years, Snoop admitted in a 2023 interview with Tiffany Haddish that he doesn't actually drink any of them, telling her flatly that he's not there to get drunk, he's there to get money. He said he stopped drinking in clubs around 2014 after a safety scare involving his drink at an event, though cannabis, the substance most tied to his public image from day one, has stayed a defining part of his brand for more than 30 years. Put it all together and you get a house that's modest by celebrity standards, a car collection built around 14 vehicles, a fortune estimated somewhere between $150 and $180 million, a marriage that survived a separation and came back stronger, and a business resume that includes buying back the exact record label that once controlled his career from the outside. That's the real story of Calvin Broadus Jr., a kid from Long Beach who built something meant to last and brought his whole family along for the ride.